Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over a decade, facing countless unexpected moments with his trademark humor and composure. But on that Tuesday afternoon in March 2023, the atmosphere in Studio B at Atlanta's Tyler Perry Studios instantly transformed from lighthearted competition to life-or-death emergency. When 62-year-old James Wilson collapsed mid-answer, clutching his chest and struggling to breathe, the veteran host's response revealed a side of him rarely seen on television. What began as a routine taping would become a profound testament to faith, community, and the remarkable power of prayer. As medical personnel rushed forward and cameras continued rolling, Steve Harvey made a decision that would touch millions of hearts and redefine what it means to be more than just a game show host. James Wilson was a 62-year-old retired high school basketball coach from Augusta, Georgia. His weathered face and salt-and-pepper hair carried the dignity of someone who had dedicated his life to mentoring young people. For 35 years, he had taught thousands of students about discipline, teamwork, and perseverance, leading his teams to 3 state championships while maintaining a reputation for integrity that transcended wins and losses. The Wilson family had come to Family Feud as a celebration. James and his wife Diane had recently marked their 40th wedding anniversary. Their children, Michael, a cardiologist, Sarah, an elementary school principal, and David, who had followed in his father's footsteps as a coach, had secretly submitted the application as a gift to their parents. When the call came that they'd been selected, it fulfilled a long-time dream for Diane, who had watched the show religiously since the Richard Dawson era. What the family hadn't shared with producers, what they had downplayed even among themselves, was James's recent health concerns. 6 months earlier, he had experienced what doctors called a cardiac event. Though he had followed his treatment plan diligently and insisted he felt fine, his son Michael had noticed subtle changes, occasional shortness of breath, fatigue after minimal exertion, and brief moments of disorientation that James would quickly dismiss. The day of taping had begun joyfully. The Wilson family arrived at the studio matching blue shirts emblazoned with Coach's Crew, excited to represent their hometown and perhaps win enough to help fund the basketball camp for underprivileged youth that had been James's retirement project. During pre-show preparations, James had been in high spirits, joking with production assistants and practicing his handshake for when he would meet Steve Harvey. "I've been preparing for this show for 40 years, he had told a production assistant. "My students used to tease me for never missing an episode, even recording them when we had away games." As they took their places on stage, the Wilson family exuded the natural chemistry that had made them stand out in auditions. James stood proudly at the center position, his presence commanding despite his average height. When Steve Harvey approached for the pre-show introductions, James's face lit up with the genuine excitement of meeting someone he'd invited into his living room for years. "Coach Wilson, welcome to Family Feud," Steve said, shaking his hand warmly. "It's an honor to be here, Mr. Harvey," James replied. "My wife says I've been rehearsing for this moment longer than I prepared for our wedding." The audience laughed as Diane playfully elbowed her husband, their easy rapport immediately evident. What no one noticed was the slight tremor in James's hand, or the momentary wince that crossed his face as he took his position at the podium. The game began well for the Wilson family. They won the first face-off, with James correctly guessing the top answer to "Name something people are afraid to do at night." His response, "Drive alone," revealed his practical nature and earned 43 points. The family cleared the board without giving up a steal, establishing an early lead against their opponents, the Martinez family from Tampa. During the commercial break, Sarah noticed her father dabbing at his forehead more frequently than usual. "You okay, Dad?" she asked quietly. "Just these lights," James assured her. "A lot hotter than they look on TV." Michael, with his medical training, studied his father more intently, but respected his privacy in the public setting. "Let me know if you need to take a break," he said casually, receiving a dismissive wave in response. As the second round began, Steve Harvey moved to the podium where James stood. "Coach, you've got a doctor, a principal, and another coach in your family. That's quite a legacy of service you've created." James nodded, his voice strong despite the increasing discomfort he was clearly working to conceal. "Teaching young people has been the greatest privilege of my life, second only to raising these three right here. I understand you've got a basketball camp for underprivileged kids," Steve continued. "Tell us about that." James's face brightened, momentarily overcoming his discomfort. "In 35 years of coaching, I saw too many talented kids whose potential was limited by finances. This camp gives them not just basketball skills, but life skills, discipline, teamwork, perseverance, things that matter on and off the court." The audience applauded warmly as Steve nodded in appreciation. That's what it's all about, giving back. Now, let's get back to the game. "Coach, we asked 100 people. Name something that becomes more valuable as it gets older." James pressed the buzzer confidently. "Wine," he answered. "Show me wine," Steve called out, and the board revealed it as the number one answer with 43 points. The Wilson family again dominated the round, with each member contributing answers. The energy was high, the momentum clearly in their favor as they approached the 300-point threshold needed to advance to fast money. It was during the third round that the first clear sign of trouble emerged. The survey question was, "Name a reason people say they can't sleep." As James pressed his buzzer and began to answer, "Stress at," his voice suddenly faltered. A look of confusion crossed his face. He gripped the podium tightly, his knuckles whitening. "Coach, you all right?" Steve asked, his usual playful demeanor shifting instantly to concern. James tried to nod, but the motion was jerky, unnatural. "Just need a moment," he managed, his words slightly slurred. Then, without warning, his knees buckled. He clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Michael reacted immediately, rushing to his father's side as James collapsed. The audience gasped collectively as the retired coach crumpled to the floor, his son barely managing to break his fall. "Dad!" Sarah cried out, the family's celebration transforming instantly into nightmare. "We need medical help now!" Michael shouted, his professional training taking over as he loosened his father's collar and checked his pulse. The studio erupted in controlled chaos. Production assistants rushed forward with the on-site medical kit. The audience sat in stunned silence, many standing to see what was happening, others turning away from the distressing scene. Steve Harvey, momentarily frozen in shock, quickly recovered and stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an emergency situation. Please remain calm. We have medical professionals on site." Indeed, the show's medic was already kneeling beside James, working alongside Michael to assess his condition. Within moments, it became clear that James was experiencing a serious cardiac event. His breathing was labored, his skin ashen. "He's having a heart attack," Michael confirmed grimly, his professional detachment barely masking his terror. "We need an ambulance and a defibrillator now." The show's producer signaled to cut to commercial, but Steve Harvey made a split-second decision that would later become one of the most discussed moments in television history. "Keep rolling," he instructed the camera operators, stepping forward to stand near the Wilson family. The producer frantically gestured that they should stop filming, but Steve was resolute. "I said keep rolling," he repeated firmly. "This family needs all the support they can get right now, and that includes the millions of people who invite us into their homes every day." What happened next transcended the boundaries of entertainment television. As the paramedics rushed toward the stage with emergency equipment, The studio fell into a hush so profound that the sound of their approaching footsteps echoed throughout the space. James Wilson lay on the studio floor, his son Michael performing CPR with the precision of his medical training, but the desperate energy of a child fighting for his father's life. Steve Harvey stood nearby, his usual commanding presence transformed into something more vulnerable, more human. For perhaps the first time in his television career, he appeared utterly without script or plan. The cameras continued to roll, capturing raw human drama unfolding in a space usually reserved for laughter and light competition. The paramedics reached James and immediately took over from Michael, their practiced movements a choreography of urgency. They attached monitoring equipment, called out vital signs, and prepared the defibrillator. "Clear!" one shouted, and James's body jerked as the electrical current passed through him, attempting to restore his heart's proper rhythm. Diane Wilson clutched her daughter Sarah, both women trembling with silent tears. David stood with one arm around his mother, the other hand covering his mouth in horror. Michael stepped back, his doctor's knowledge a burden now, as he understood all too clearly what was happening. The audience remained frozen in their seats, many clutching hands with strangers beside them, others openly praying. The Martinez family, their competitors just moments before, stood with bowed heads, the mother making the sign of the cross repeatedly. After the second shock from the defibrillator showed no improvement, a palpable despair began to settle over the studio. The lead paramedic glanced up, his expression grim, as he prepared for a third attempt. It was at this moment that Steve Harvey did something unprecedented in game show history. He stepped forward deliberately and knelt down next to James Wilson's prone form. Without hesitation or self-consciousness, he took off his signature suit jacket, loosened his tie, and placed his hand gently on James's shoulder. "Folks," he said, his voice carrying through the silent studio without need of his microphone. "I believe in the power of prayer. Right now, this good man and his family need every bit of support we can give them." He bowed his head, closed his eyes, and began to pray aloud. "Lord God," Steve's voice resonated with a depth and sincerity rarely heard in his television persona. "We come before you now as a community, as strangers brought together in this moment of crisis. We ask for your healing hand on Coach James Wilson. We ask for your strength for his family. We ask for your guidance for these medical professionals working to save him." His voice grew stronger, more passionate, as he continued. "This man has dedicated his life to lifting up young people, to teaching them values that matter, to showing them the way forward in life. Now we're asking you to lift him up, Lord, to give him more time with the family he loves, more time to continue the good work he's doing in this world." Throughout the studio, people began to join in, first with soft murmurs of "Amen," then with their own whispered prayers. The Martinez family moved closer to the Wilson family, offering silent support. Production crew members, usually focused on technical details and timing, stood with heads bowed. Even those audience members, who might not have shared Steve's faith, respected the profound human moment unfolding before them. "We don't know your plan, God," Steve continued, his voice breaking slightly with emotion, "but we're asking, from the bottom of our hearts, for healing in this place today. Show your power here, Lord. Show your mercy." As if responding to his words, the medical equipment suddenly beeped with a changed pattern. The paramedics looked up sharply, their focus intensifying. "We've got rhythm," one announced. "Faint, but it's there." Michael Wilson's professional composure finally broke as he sobbed with relief. "Dad, you're fighting," he encouraged, moving closer to the paramedics. "Keep fighting." Steve remained kneeling, his prayer shifting to gratitude. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for hearing us. Please continue to strengthen James as these professionals care for him. The paramedics worked with renewed energy, stabilizing James for transport. As they prepared to move him onto a stretcher, James's eyes fluttered open briefly, disoriented and weak, but undeniably present. "Diane?" he whispered, seeking his wife. "I'm here, James," she answered immediately, moving to where he could see her. "We're all here." Steve stood, giving the family space with their loved one. He addressed the silent studio audience, his face streaked with tears he made no attempt to hide. "Family," he said, using the term he often employed to address his audience, but now with deeper resonance. What we've witnessed today goes far beyond a game show. We've been reminded that beneath all our differences, all our competitions, we are connected in our humanity. We've seen the power of love, of faith, and of community. As the paramedics prepared to transport James to the hospital, Steve turned to the Wilson family. "Whatever you need, whatever it takes, Family Feud and I personally will make sure Coach Wilson gets the best care possible. Today, we're all on Coach's crew." The studio erupted in applause, not the usual game show enthusiasm, but something more profound, an expression of collective relief, support, and shared humanity. Many were openly weeping, including members of the production staff who had witnessed countless episodes, but never anything approaching this raw emotional intensity. As James was carefully moved onto the stretcher, he reached out a weak hand toward Steve. The host stepped forward immediately, taking the offered hand between both of his own. "Thank you," James whispered, each word clearly requiring enormous effort. "I heard your prayer." Steve nodded, unable to speak for a moment, as emotion overwhelmed him. "You keep fighting, Coach," he finally managed. "You've got more young people to mentor, more lives to change." As the paramedics prepared to wheel James out, his son Michael addressed the studio audience. "My father has dedicated his life to teaching young people that what matters most is how you respond when life gets difficult. Today, he's teaching that lesson one more time, and I want to thank all of you for being part of it." The unprecedented episode of Family Feud would never air in its entirety, but carefully edited portions, approved by the Wilson family, would later be shared as part of a special on faith, community, and healing, a program that would become one of the most watched in the show's long history. James Wilson's journey back to health was neither quick nor easy. The heart attack he suffered on the Family Feud set was severe, what medical professionals call a widowmaker, with complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery. He underwent emergency quadruple bypass surgery that evening, followed by months of careful recovery and rehabilitation. What made his journey remarkable, however, was not just his survival against significant odds. It was the extraordinary community that formed around him and his family in the aftermath of that dramatic day. 2 weeks after James was rushed to the hospital, Steve Harvey visited him in the cardiac rehabilitation unit. Away from cameras and publicity, the host spent 3 hours with the Wilson family, listening to James's coaching stories and sharing his own journey of faith. Before leaving, Steve pressed a business card into James's hand with a personal phone number written on the back. "Anything you need, day or night," he told James. "My commitment didn't end when the ambulance left the studio." True to his word, Steve remained connected to the Wilson family through James's recovery. When medical bills threatened to overwhelm them, despite insurance, an anonymous donor covered the remaining expenses. The family later confirmed what many had suspected, that Steve had taken care of it personally, requesting no recognition. But the impact extended far beyond one family's medical crisis. The story of what happened on the Family Feud stage, a narrative of prayer, community response, and seeming medical miracle, began to spread through social media and news outlets. The network received thousands of messages from viewers asking when they could see the episode where Steve Harvey prayed for the contestant who collapsed. After careful consultation with the Wilson family and medical ethics experts, a decision was made. Rather than airing the actual emergency as entertainment, the network produced a special program titled Beyond the Game: Faith, Community, and Healing on Family Feud. The special featured interviews with the Wilson family, the paramedics who responded, audience members who were present, and Steve Harvey himself. It included carefully selected footage from the incident, focusing not on James's medical distress, but on the community response that followed. The centerpiece was Steve's spontaneous prayer, shown in its entirety with the Wilson family's blessing. If sharing this helps even one person recognize the signs of heart attack or brings communities together in prayer and support, then what happened, to me, has deeper purpose, James explained during his interview, now recovered enough to speak with his natural educator's clarity. The special aired 6 months after the incident and drew an audience of over 20 million viewers, unprecedented numbers for a program of its kind. It sparked a national conversation about faith in public spaces, the role of prayer in moments of crisis, and the human connections that transcend entertainment. For Steve Harvey, the experience marked a profound shift in his public persona. While he had never hidden his faith, he had generally kept it separate from his entertainment career. Now, he began speaking more openly about the role of spirituality in his life, initiating a podcast called Beyond the Laugh, where he discussed matters of faith with guests from various religious backgrounds. What happened with Coach Wilson reminded me that sometimes our purpose finds us in unexpected moments, he explained in the first episode. I was hired to host a game show, but in that moment, I was called to be something more, a conduit for a community's prayers and support. The Wilson family experienced their own transformation. James's near-death experience and remarkable recovery gave new urgency to his basketball camp for underprivileged youth. When he was strong enough to return to coaching, he found his roster had tripled in size, with families driving from neighboring states to have their children learn from the coach who lived because of prayer. Donations poured in, allowing the camp to expand from a 2-week summer program to year-round mentorship. The Wilson Family Foundation was established with an initial anonymous donation, again, widely believed to have come from Steve Harvey, and a mission of providing both athletic opportunity and health education to underserved communities. 1 year after James's collapse, the Wilson family returned to Family Feud, not as contestants, but as honored guests for a special episode focused on heart health awareness. The show partnered with the American Heart Association to educate viewers about recognizing the signs of heart attack and performing CPR. The episode ended with James and Steve standing side by side, demonstrating hands-only CPR techniques that anyone could learn. A year ago, we witnessed something that went far beyond a game show, Steve told the audience. Today, we're turning that moment into a movement that could save lives. The studio, filled with cardiac survivors and medical professionals, erupted in applause as James embraced Steve, both men openly emotional at their reunion on the stage where they had experienced such intensity together. But perhaps the most profound legacy emerged in hospital waiting rooms across the country. Families facing medical crises began to report a curious phenomenon: strangers approaching them, introducing themselves simply as part of Coach's crew, and asking if they could pray together or offer support. This informal network of compassion, inspired by the Wilson family's story and named after the matching shirts they had worn on that fateful day, grew into an organized volunteer movement. Coach's crew chapters formed in hospitals nationwide, offering emotional support, practical assistance, and prayer for families enduring medical emergencies far from home. 3 years after the incident, a dedicated cardiac care wing opened at Atlanta's premier hospital, funded in part by the Wilson Family Foundation and contributions from the Coaches Crew network. In the entrance lobby stood a simple plaque with words familiar to millions who had watched the Family Feud special. "We are connected in our humanity. In our moments of greatest need, we are never truly alone." Inspired by James Wilson and the prayer that saved him. James, now fully recovered and more active than ever in his community work, often reflected on the strange trajectory his life had taken. A man who had spent decades teaching young people about perseverance had become, in his 60s, a national symbol of resilience. A private family moment of crisis had transformed into a movement of compassion, touching thousands of lives. "I died for approximately 4 minutes on that game show stage," he would tell the young people at his basketball camps. "What brought me back wasn't just medical science, though I'm eternally grateful for those skilled professionals. What brought me back was a community that refused to give up, a community that, for those critical moments, included millions of people who'd never met me but chose to care anyway." The episode of Family Feud that never fully aired, yet touched more lives than any in the show's history, became a testament to what can happen when entertainment transforms, even briefly, into authentic human connection. For Steve Harvey, for the Wilson family, and for the countless people touched by their story, that day represented something that transcended television, a reminder that in our most vulnerable moments, we have the capacity to lift each other up in ways that defy expectation and sometimes even explanation. As Steve Harvey would later reflect in his memoir, "I've spent my career trying to entertain people, to make them laugh. But the most important moment of my professional life came when I set all that aside and simply prayed with a stranger. It taught me that sometimes our greatest purpose finds us precisely when we stop performing and start being authentically present in moments of need."